Hey, Mr. Witherow here. Today we're going to get into factoring. All right, so factoring is a very important topic in algebra, and it will be carried through for the rest of the math that you're probably going to get into. So let's start with, the very first one we're going to start with is the GCF, right? We're going to factor out the GCF, which means that it's the greatest common factor. All right, 3 words: greatest, biggest, largest number, largest term, right? So this may be a number, it could be a variable, it could be a term, right? Which means that there is a number and a variable with an exponent, all right? It could be anything. It's the greatest one. So the greatest common, they have to have it, well, common, everybody has to have it, right? So every term has to have it. It has to be seen in every term. And then the factor is what we're going to get into. All right, factor just means that what do you multiply together to get something. All right, let's go back. Let's think back a little bit. All right, if we think back and we think about something that looks like this, we call this multiplication. Well, more specifically, we're going to call it distribution. We're going to take the 2 and multiply it by the x squared, and then we're going to take the 2 and multiply it by the 2. We're going to get 2x squared plus 4. All right, so let's look at this. Let's look a little bit closer. So if we're going to go from this way to this way, we call it multiplication. But if we're going to now give our questions, our problems are going to look like this, and then our answers are going to look like this. And this is called greatest common factor, right? Let's look closer here. What does a 2 and a 4 have in common? What's the greatest thing they have in common? Well, they have a 2. This one has an x squared, but this one doesn't. So the only thing they have in common is the 2. So we take it out. Then what do we have on the inside? We have what's left over. So what do you multiply 2 by to get this 2? 1, right? And then x squared is already there, so we have to put x squared here. What do you multiply 2 by to get 4? We multiply it by 2. That's why that 2 goes there. So what happens is that we take this thing and we factor out the greatest term, greatest common factor, and we put it there, and then we put what's left, or what do we multiply this by to get this down here. That's what we're going for. So greatest common factor. All right, so here are what you need to know, right, about greatest common factor. 1, you're going to define the greatest or the largest term that divides into all the terms. The variables that appear in all terms must be pulled out, and you pull out the smallest exponent. That's something that you're going to have to remember, all right? And then you're going to write the terms as product using the greatest common factor. So that's the greatest common factor. And then what's left over. And then you're going to use the distributive property to figure out what's left over. And then you're going to check it by multiplying. All right, so this is what you do. You may want to write this down. Pause the video right now. Write these 5 steps down. That way then you can have it. All right. Let's do a couple problems here. If I have 6x squared minus 9x, right? So 6x squared minus 9x. You first ask yourself, what do these both have in common? What does a 6 and a 9 have in common, right? So some of you are going to have to maybe do the old factor tree here. So 1 times 6, 2 times 3, and then 1 times 9, and 3 times 3. So what is the largest number that they have in common? Well, it looks like they both have a 3. All right, so that's going to be our greatest common factor. That's going to be our GCF. All right, then we look at the variables, x squared and x. What is the smallest exponent? 2 and 1. Since they both have x's, then we look at the smallest exponent. So we're going to take one of the x's out. So now we're going to open up our parentheses, and we're going to ask ourselves, what do we multiply 3 by to get 6? That would be that 2. And if I have 1 already, but I needed 2, I needed 1 more, x. And then minus, and then what do I multiply 3 by to get 9? That's that 3 over here. And I already have an x, so I'm done. So then that would be it. So this is my greatest common, that's my factorization of it. So these two things multiply together to give me this. Well, let's just check. 3x times 2x, 3 times 2 is 6, x times x is x squared, and then 3 times 3 is 9, and then you bring down the x. So notice that this is the same as this. So we got it right. So this is our answer. That's what we're looking for. So you're going to constantly ask yourself these questions. What's the largest number that goes into these two? What's the smallest exponent? If they all have variables, they all have to have a variable. All right? Let's try another one. 7x plus 21. All right, so what is the greatest common factor? What is the factorization here? So 7 and 21, right? Here's my hint. Always take the smaller one and see if it actually goes into the bigger one, because maybe, just maybe, that's going to be your greatest common factor. So 7 does go into 21, so I like a 7. This one has an x, but this one does not, so we can't take out an x. They do not have it in common, so that's all we got. So what do you multiply 7 by to get 7x? I multiply it by x. What do you multiply 7 by to get 21? I multiply it by 3. So 7 times x, 7x, 7 times 3, 21. All day long, all right? Now, the next thing they're gonna try to do is just expand it, right? So maybe they have something like this. All right? So maybe they have something like this. So now we have 3 terms. So now we're going to have a greatest common factor out here, and then parentheses, and we're going to have 3 terms on the inside, because there's 3 terms. So if we're not going to get rid of a term, we're going to just have it. All right, so what does a 7, a 14, and a 21 have in common? Again, the smallest number. See if it goes into all the other ones. Yep, it does. So we're going to take the 7. And then remember, we want the smallest exponent. This is n to the third, this is n to the second. So we're going to take this n. This is my greatest common factor now. Then this is what's left. So what do you multiply 7 by to get 7? 1, but we don't have to write the 1 down. I have an n, but I needed 3 n, so I need 2 more. So we're going to have n squared. Because remember, when we multiply, we add the exponents. 1 plus 2 is 3. And then what do you multiply 7 by to get 14? 2. I have an n. I only needed an n, so I'm good. Plus 7 times what gives me 21? 3. I have n, but I need 2, so I need an n. And then there's my answer. That's what we're looking for. All right? So again, you're looking for the greatest common factor. What do they have in common? All right? And then what don't they have in common? Give it a shot.